que sí.
Sweet.
Okay.
Muy bueno, buenas tardes to everybody that's joining us. I say tardes because I'm greeting you all from California, Califas, from Sacramento, which are traditional unceded, ancestral, and also stolen lands from the Maidu, Miwok, and a host of other indigenous communities. Welcome to our co-hosted panel with Audubon, California, Latino Outdoors, Raza in the Outdoors. I'm excited. We have a lot of amazing people here that, like I said, I'm personally excited because some of them are friends and personal colleagues. Other are people that I know of and respect and admire. No more than 1 degree of separation. And it really represents a lot of the variety and diversity of what we mean to be raza, to be gente, doing this work in the outdoors, environment and conservation. And that we all, just as we also are showing what it means to be different in that space, we ourselves are showing that we can be different, and that's a good thing. It's not about converting into this idea of who gets to belong outdoors. We get to show it up. Okay? So to start, I'm gonna go around. You'll be hearing a little bit in terms of the co-hosted organizations, but I also want to just jump into the panelists, because an hour is going to go by fast, and they will have the opportunity to say a little bit about themselves and introduce themselves. And I won't time anybody, but I will say be pithy so that way everyone has a chance, and then we'll flow from there. And the invitation is for you to share you. So we'll start with Tanya, and then Tanya, I'm gonna mix it up a little bit by having you select the next person that goes after you.
That's good. Thanks so much for the introduction. Mi nombre es Tanya Romero. I am a program coordinator at the Audubon Center at Debs Park in Los Angeles, California. Basically, in a nutshell, I'm a community-based scientist or biologist. I focus a lot on community-based science projects. I am a birder. I work on behalf of Audubon, California. So birds are pretty much my life. Me encantan mucho las aves, but I'm also very interested in bridging a lot of the birding, right? This concept of birding to the greater community. So I'm always looking for ways on how to make birding, right, or this act or this process into something a lot more intersectional. For me, my passion for the birds has helped me connect a lot with my own ancestors, with my own grandmother specifically, who I didn't really get to spend a lot of time with. But just the simple act of knowing that she was in love with birds led me to this career path. So I'm definitely willing to share a lot more in this panel.
And you get to choose who goes next.
Let's go with Jessica.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gonzalez. I am a wildlife biologist here in the Bay Area in California. I grew up and was raised here. Early on, I grew up loving the outdoors, and later in life, I found out that I could make a career out of it. And I'm currently a biologist with San Francisco Bay Birds Observatory here in Milpitas. I mainly survey for wildlife plovers here in the Bay Area. They breed in salt pond habitat in addition to a lot of coastal habitat. I know a lot of people know them for being in the beaches and stuff, but they actually are here in the Bay Area in the South Bay. And additionally, I also work with a small consulting firm doing a lot of surveys for a lot of our wildlife here in California. We have a lot of endemic and special threatened wildlife here, so I get to work with not only birds, because birds are my passion, but additionally other cool little critters. And additionally, I'm also a master's student at San Jose State, and of course, my subject are plovers that breed here in the Bay Area, so that's exciting to do. And I'm just excited to be here and give a perspective as a biologist. So thank you. Cool. And then I'll throw it up. And I'll throw it up to Zico.
Buenas tardes a todos y todas y todequis. Mi nombre es Chico González. Soy maestro de high school, de preparatoria. También soy activista, organizador, poeta, artista, fotógrafo, un poquito de todo. Tengo 9 años trabajando en la high school. And prior to that, I was a college professor at Sac State and at UC Davis teaching Chicano studies in our studio. And I came late to the outdoors. Growing up, like nobody that I knew liked the outdoors. And I'm just going to be honest. Back in the barrio, it was like, oh, esos para güeros, we don't do that. We're too cool for that. Growing up in the inner city. And I wish that I would have found the outdoors when I was a teenager. So I came to the outdoors maybe about 8 years ago. A colleague of mine by the name of David Berg was an instructor for the National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS. And we started a program at our high school where every year we send 1 to 2 students of color into the outdoors. They do a 30-day expedition. Right now I have a student in Wyoming backpacking in the Wind River. In the past, we have sent students to Alaska. We sent students to Washington, to Wyoming. And I myself went to the Yukon territory where I backpacked for 15 days in the Kuluani mountain range. And 15 days I whitewater canoed from the Kuluani Lake all the way to Dawson, Yukon, which is like the distance from Sacramento to Los Angeles. I had never been on a canoe before, so that was like totally life-changing. I remember being in the canoe and being really afraid, and by the end, my feet were hanging out the canoe, and it was a beautiful experience. So I started this persona, Chicano in the Wilderness, and every year I take high school students and community members into the wilderness here in Sacramento within a 2-hour radius. And for a lot of the kids from Southside Sacramento, if you know anything about Sacramento, the South Side is the barrio, the hood. And so a lot of the kids from there, I take them, and from Northgate, the North Side, Sacramento's a big hood. But anyways, the point is that I take students into hiking areas, national parks and stuff like that. And for most of them, it's the first time hiking. So there is a beautiful hike here in Sacramento called Hidden Falls. It's a 10-mile hike. And I took some football players, some Chicano football players, and they thought it was going to be easy. And when we got there, I said, we're about to do 10 miles. And they were like, oh my God. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing this up is because there's a little creek, Hidden Falls. And I told the students, check it out. And they were like, what? The river. I go, the water. And they were like, wow. And somebody says, that's better than hearing gunshots in South Sac. So coming from that perspective, introducing inner city youth to the outdoors is a beautiful thing. And I'm happy to be here with all of you sharing about our experiences. Cecilia, sigues.
Gracias, Chico. Hi, my name is Cecilia Alvarez. I'm from Mexico. I live in Cancun and in Mérida. I travel a lot. But I love to work with birds. And mi esposo y yo aquí formamos una organización que se llama Green Jay Bird Conservancy y nos dedicamos a promover el conocimiento y la conservación de las aves de la península de Yucatán, de 3 states que conforman la península. And we travel a lot. We work with people in the cities and people in the towns, and we try to connect them with the birds. The birds is a very powerful tool for us, and we are so happy to work with them because we love it. And we love to find places and new places to walk around and to see new birds. And we collaborate with CONABIO, es de Comisión Nacional para el Conocimiento y Uso de la Biodiversidad here in Mexico. And with them, we do a lot of projects with citizen science, like Programa de Aves Urbanas, que es para conocer las aves de la ciudad. And with the, soy tutor para la plataforma naturalista, iNaturalist for you in United States. Here is Naturalista. Y somos monitores comunitarios de aves. Tenemos una red, somos 60 personas en diferentes puntos de la península, en la costa, en las selvas, en los pueblos, en las ciudades, que vamos recolectando información acerca de las aves y esa información la compartimos en las plataformas mundiales como eBird y eNaturalist. Y en sí lo que más nos gusta es conectar a las personas y para mí no hay nada más hermoso como cuando alguien ve un ave a través de los binoculares por primera vez. Esa emoción y esa alegría que le da cuando la observa, wow! Maybe it's the most common bird in your area, but for them it's like, wow, look at that, and the wings and the colors, and that I love that feeling. So that's it. And we collaborate with Cornell Lab too, with different programs with citizen science, Celebrate Urban Birds and Detectives de Aves Internacional. And we have workshops in different places, not only in Mexico, and in Peru and in Guatemala too. So maybe we can talk more later. So, hi, Mark.
Hey, buenas tardes todos. Me llamo Jaimar. Nací pues en Los Ángeles y like many other people here on this panel, I was actually pretty close to the outdoors. I lived in Baldwin Park, and that I actually didn't know this until recently, but I saw that the Angeles National Forest was right next to it, and I had never visited, being there for years of my life. So I didn't really get involved with being outdoors until much later, and that was when I started working with some community-oriented organizations that really try to do a lot of the work that a lot of the folks on this panel try to do, connect youth within cities to the outdoors. So it was actually a boating organization. We went out in little boats and rode around on the Hudson River in New York City. And it was pretty wild to me because I didn't think New York City was outdoors, but of course it's outdoors. And yeah, so my journey has been one kind of, you know, growing up in the city to getting involved with groups that bring people out there. And then that sort of community-centric path has led me to continue that with my work. So I work for Audubon, California at the Richardson Bay Audubon Center as a community engagement coordinator. And sort of coming from the getting involved with the environment as a sort of form of service, it's something that kind of saved me back a few years ago when I was confused and didn't know what to do. And I see that so much in so many young people growing up today. You know, we're growing up in a world where we hear climate change is basically going to destroy everything. And que mundo va a haber, you know? But I work a lot in showing people that they can be a part of this, and that in finding a home in conservation, you can do more than just be a part. You can make something of yourself. And I find that really valuable. And I think a lot of the youth I work with find it valuable too.
Fantastic. Awesome. And I'm your host moderator, Jose Gonzalez, or as I often say, full disclosure, Jose Guadalupe Adonis Gonzalez Rosales de Leon. And I'm an immigrant from Mexico. So grew up in the rural state of Nayarit, and then migrated with my family right before the age of 9. Grew up here in the Central Valley of California. I'm grateful to be here with you. My entry into this space was that, born in Mexico, and then kind of like slowly through college. And in some ways, like Chico really was later that I kind of got introduced to this idea of camping, or like the outdoors, in the sense that we might see it in a REI or Patagonia catalog, for example. But since then is really getting to connect with a diversity, right, of like representation within our own community about this. So we're going to jump into a few questions with people here, and then know that for anybody like tuning in, if you drop in questions, we'll do our best to capture them, that we'll be able to answer them towards the end of this. I know there was one about fluency, for example. You don't have to apologize for not being fluent in Spanish. And our intention is not to make anyone uncomfortable about it. It's just also coming from me being able to center. What does it look like when we center someone like Ceci, who we're asking them to be comfortable, to be share in Spanish as well, because so often we're asking her to have to always share in English. So just know that that's there, and there's going to be the opportunity to follow up with people after, so that you maybe can see how you can collaborate or support each other in that way. And I want to jump into this idea that this week is Latino Conservation Week, right? So that's that's why we're here, and the space that we're having together is titled Raza in the Outdoors. So the first question is to get at this question of cultural identity, right? We know we're here because there's a connection to outdoor and conservation space, work and whatnot. But I have this thing on the question of identity. How do you identify? While this is Latino Conservation Week, it's important to note that we all connect with our roots and this idea of razaness from different points. And so when we say, I sometimes say, I'm Mexicano by birth, Latino by social cultural identity, Chicano by social political identity, and Hispanic by census count. Right? That's meant to be funny too at the end. But overall, I'm mestizo and paisa in many different ways. So let's just quickly go around and kind of share, how would you answer that? How do you identify? And let's start with Jessica.
Okay. I was born here. My parents are born in Mexico, and I definitely, growing up, was kind of confused as to how I should identify myself. And I definitely love the idea now of the LatinX. And at the same time, I consider myself, even though I am American, I do love, Mexico. I've gone before, and soy Mexicana, by birth. It's just a little bit different, but at the same time, it's just one of those things. It's confusing when you're in the United States, especially with the, census. I'm Hispanic, and you get into what does that mean? And then there's Latino, and then there's Chicano. There's just so many identities. It's really hard growing up, and especially, myself growing up here, I'm a little bit whiter and I have freckles. I'm different, and at the same time, just trying to fit in different places, but at the same time, yeah, soy Mexicana, and I'm proud of it. And especially being out in the field, it's one of those things that you should be proud for where you come from, even if you've never been, your family's from there and stuff like that. So yeah.
Gracias, and we'll just kind of keep going around. You always have the option to pass, or just say you can come back to it later. Hamar?
So my parents are both immigrants. My mother is from Michoacan in Mexico, and my father is from Seoul in South Korea. So I suppose I identify as biracial. With censuses, I always have to click Hispanic, but also click Asian. It's like a weird thing how they're not even in the same area. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I'll just say Mexican, Korean, American.
Nice, I love it. Tanya?
Yeah, I think for me, that's a loaded question. I think my identity is always very fluid because you learn, right? And I think race and a lot of these identities are ultimately a social construction, right? So I guess for the time being now, soy Mexicana y soy Latina. And I try to also make that point because I personally can't separate being Latino or Latina from my female identity. I have to be both at the same time. So it's, yeah, something to be mindful of. I think as I'm getting older and also exploring a lot of where my own family came from. They're from Mexico, from Hidalgo and Puebla and Querétaro, and with a lot of the state of Transylvania, a lot of our indigenous roots get lost in the process. So I feel like when I start exploring that a lot more, then my identity will change, right? So yeah, as of now, I'm Mexicana Latina, but yeah.
Gracias for that framing perspective también. And then we'll go Chico and then Ceci.
It almost feels that we need a panel just for that. But that's another time. So my identity is very rooted in Chicanismo. My mom and dad are from Nayarit too. Jose and I might be related over there, the Gonzalez from the Dakota and Huichol Nation of Nayarit. But when I came here, I took on this identity. I self-identify myself as a Chicano because of my political awareness and my political work that I've been doing for maybe like more than 2 decades now. So I have a problem with the word Latino and Latina and LatinX, not because of the A or the O or the X, but because it's rooted in the second most Eurocentric label given to our people. So by you saying you're Hispanic or Latino, right, you're like acknowledging that the whiteness in you. But if you look at us, right, we are indigena, we're also Africano. So you see that, right? I know Jose got his Afro, his Mexican Afro right now. But you can see that in us, right? So by saying, oh, it's in the back, okay. I was gonna say, ¿qué pasó? But everything is rooted in that, right? And I think by me, myself, calling myself Chicano or Mexicano, I still have that sentimiento or sentido de hermandad con todos los pueblos de las Américas que fueron colonizados por España. No tengo que usar no tenemos que usar la misma identidad. Tú no puedes decir, hoy soy latino, tú eres latino. Yo puedo decir, yo soy mexicano y tú eres puertorriqueño, boricua, somos hermanos, hermanas, hermana X, ¿verdad? So my identity is very rooted in Chicanismo, in indigenismo, everything that has been denied to us, right? Oftentimes, you know, I'm a parent. I have a 4-year-old, and we always speak in our families about, oh, mira, qué bueno que salió güerito, no salió morenito como tú. So there's a lot of those biases, right? And we have to acknowledge that. We have to get rid of that and acknowledge our indigenismo. Sí, está morenito. Mira qué chulo. Qué bien que no salió güerito como tú. You know, we have to like maybe flip the coin. I don't know, but we have to acknowledge and be proud of who we are. You know, I work with high school students, and a lot of them are confused because all their lives they have been made to feel less, right? Some kids don't want to, they rather choose the label Latino because they're trying to get away from la mexicanidad, because that's seen as someone en los campos trabajando duro, trabajando humildemente, o alguien vendiendo paletas o frutas, qué sé yo, para hacer un mejor futuro para su familia, un mejor presente y un futuro para su familia. So we have to acknowledge that, right? Why are we doing that? Are we doing that to get away from being Mexican? Or what are we doing? So, like I said, you know, that's another hour or more. But me, myself, Chicano.
Bueno, pues yo orgullosamente mexicana y orgullosamente de haber nacido en esta área de México, que es la península de Yucatán. Por parte de mi familia tenemos raíces tanto mayas como españolas. Es una mezcla, pero siempre me ha llamado la atención conectar un poquito más con esta parte de la región que son los mayas. Creo que es muy importante porque aquí siempre cuando hablas una lengua indígena, la gente tiene miedo de usarla, ¿no? Tiene miedo de hablarla porque siempre se ha asociado con discriminación, ¿no? Entonces, they don't use the Maya a lot because they feel the people is gonna treat them different. So the little kids don't want to speak, or sometimes the parents don't want to teach them the Maya language because they don't want the kids suffer the same they suffer. So I think this part of the birds are very important because with play with them and we teach them about the importance of the nature, you can teach the language too about the names of the birds, and it's like a little step to connect them and to feel it's okay to speak it. So that's for me.
Gracias, Ceci. And thank you for all capturing that, both the beautiful but also the needed complexity of identity. And as Chico said, this is a whole hour on its own. And many of us, I know, have a lot of experience and practice as well as things we can share. The two things, of course, is, as noted, is this idea of mestizaje, right? And that question of in service of what, or what am I grounding myself in? So that acknowledges that, you know, like in Mexico, Afro ancestry is la tercera raíz. It's the third root, the second one being el indigenismo. And so it comes with the responsibility around anti-Blackness, around shadeism, colorism, as well as the blessings of a lot of the eco-cultural practices that we have from our indigenous heritage. And then how that looks like now, right? Some of the questions I know we'll get to, which like, well, why does the census have Hispanic and Latinx and so forth? That's a deeper question as well. But acknowledging that then we hold all these multitude of identities, and this idea of the outdoors or conservation or nature, which themselves are constructs, as Tania mentioned, still we're in them. So I want to open it up now for people to share, what is that identity is for you, whether it's the work that you do, maybe, bird conservation, scientist, educator, like what is, explain a little bit more. Some of you mentioned an introduction, but what is this idea of being a conservationist or an outdoorsist or a naturalist or a birder? That space, what does that mean to you? This will be open for people to step in as they like.
I'll start. So to me, being a conservationist, especially in the context of being or coming from immigrant parents, was very much like a self-made identity choice. Where I often say that being a naturalist or a conservationist is more of a choice of resistance, because coming from a background where, my parents always grew up telling me, hey, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to study super hard, because otherwise you're not going to make it in this country and you're going to live like we did back there, so there's this element, and I think conservation in general has this this stigma of being something that you need to have a certain degree of privilege to get into, and I certainly see where people are coming from when they say that. And I wouldn't say that I grew up the most poor person around. My family definitely was not incredibly well off. So anyways, all of this to say, I feel like I had to come to a degree of a certain sequence of events had to happen for me to even have this available to me. And then I made the choice to go and say, okay, I having, worked like my parents told me to work, and gotten to college and done all these things that they said, this is what you're supposed to do to succeed. And then to go and reject, oh, I'm going to fall into this sort of capitalist trap and try to make all the money I can with my education, and say, actually, I find that I care more about saving our planet and saving all of the creatures that inhabit it and all of the people that are going to suffer when things get worse. If that very much feels like, okay, there is all this resistance, but because I had to overcome all of that, I feel that this is the strongest part of my identity. I was born to a Mexican mother and a Korean father, and I didn't necessarily choose that. But and not saying that I'm not proud of my heritage, but I identify more strongly personally with being a conservationist than I do with my race.
Thank you, Emma. Others that would add? I know that added that element of what is considered quote unquote normal and what's the idea of belonging and not belonging.
Yeah, I think to piggyback a lot on what Haymar mentioned, I think for me it was always very rooted on that. And I think also referring to a little bit of what Chico you mentioned, right, of this idea of Chicanismo and this idea of, intentionally returning back to roots. So I myself also had like my own struggle with my own parents when I came into the field. A lot of it for the same reasons, like, oh, like, cuando te mandé a la escuela, I wanted you to be all dressed up, all nice, en tu falda, en tu vestido, like la oficina, tú tenías que ser secretaria or like whatever, right? And something she said a lot to me was, oh, like now you look like your grandpa, who used to work the fields, right? Or, grew up in the pueblo. And I think like for me, it was a lot of like, when I began to have a lot of that connection to my own grandpa of like, man, my grandpa knows a lot more than I do. And I'm the one that got the degree, right? I was like, but like my own family have been conservationists this whole time, except they were never coined into that term, right? Like if I Google conservationist, at least within American society, it's not going to be my grandpa. It's not going to be anyone that looks like my grandpa. It's going to be who? Like John Muir, Theodore Roosevelt. It's going to be like all of these white people that we can even get into a whole story of like, who they are, right? Outside the conservation, or whatever that was, right? But it's not people that resemble us. And something else that, hit a point one time when we were doing a altar for Dia de los Muertos, and we were trying to make a theme on conservationists of color, was I have to Google dead conservationists for like environmentalists or conservationists of color to show up. I have to Google dead, like, POC conservationists. And when I put dead environmentalists, dead conservationists, everyone shows up, right? You have Berta Cáceres, you have all these indigenous community activists all over Latin America, right? That are fighting for, clean air, clean water, like deforestation or reforestation, that are fighting to keep their land, right? So then to me, I was like, man, like reclaiming, right? Like what that word is, and going back to like, for us, at least within American context, it's a huge privilege to be able to call ourselves this conservation environmentalist term, right? Without feeling like our life is in jeopardy, right? And at the same time, how do we reclaim that word to be inclusive of the people that are that, but are not acknowledged that? Simply in California, we have our farmers that can tell you halibirds, because they're just working the field, but they can tell you what's flying around. They can tell you what they're hearing. They say, oh, esas son las golondrinas. They come out at 5 a.m. They're out of here at 6. But no one's calling them birders, but they can tell you a lot more than like I can tell you sometimes, So yeah, so I think for me, it's like going back to a lot to what Hamar just mentioned. It's a lot of resistance and recoining and overall defining what conservation is. And if they don't want it, then creating something new. I don't have to fit into that bubble, into that term. Like I'm long over that.
Gracias, Tanya. Chico, Ceci, or Jessica, looks like you're all getting ready.
Yeah, so for myself, I know, I didn't really know that I could be a wildlife biologist until later in life. And I always got it from my dad. It was like, oh, what are you going to do with that? Is it going to pay the bill? Same thing, is it going to sustain you? And at some point I just had been like, hey, this is what I want to do. You got to either be behind me, respect me, kind of thing. And at the same time, once I got, was starting to work out in the field and being a wildlife biologist, it took me a long time to actually be proud to call myself a biologist, because I just didn't feel worthy of that title, or, it's just, I felt like I wasn't part of it. At the same time, that's something that I deal with even now, is imposter syndrome, where I just don't feel like I belong. And it's one of those things I have to remind myself, no, you should be here. You worked so hard to get to this point. And it's just one of those struggles that, that you don't see a lot of people of color in the field that we're in, especially as myself. There's a lot of men, there's a lot of people, white people. And it's one of those things where it's just like, I'm a small percentage of the people in the workforce. And, it just would be nice to see people like myself and actually have society bring me up and be like, no, you deserve to be here. You should be here. And it's one of those things that I struggle with. And, it's one of those things that I'm still struggling with. And, even as far as I've been. So yeah, I could definitely agree with you, Tanya and Hamar, that it's just one of those things where it's just other things are fighting you and just you want to belong.
I was just gonna say, it's also about claiming space. This is for all of us, not just for a specific group of people. And reconnecting to Mother Nature is always a great thing, especially for young adults living in the city, in the inner city. To me, it's a way to introduce the younger generations to the outdoors by just a simple hike. And a lot of people don't know that within like 45 minutes outside of Sacramento, there's like some beautiful hikes in Auburn and Placerville, up north by Chico, California. And also about like coming full circle, right? Like right now, I see a lot of people building jardines and getting into plantas and curanderismo. And everybody in Mexico is doing that growing up. Hey, voy a traerme hierbabuena, tráeme la ruda. ¿Qué te duele el diente? Ponte comino. And lo que está diciendo Tania, ¿no? Los pájaros. Ay, qué bonito canta ese sensontle, right? And people like know like everything. But because we have moved out of our areas into the city, we forget about those things. I remember growing up in Mexico. I grew up in San Luis Rio Colorado, Sonora, in the border, right next to Mexicali, San Luis, Arizona, and Calexico. And I remember like I wanted to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings, right? Because we used to get all the channels from the US, ABC, CBS, and all that. And I remember my mom would be like, like Jose Francisco Javier Gonzalez Duran, right? And I grew up as Javier. So mom would be like, Javier, ve a hacerle cajeta a las matas, ponte a regar las matas, right? Water the plants. And I'll be like, no, I want to watch like Los Pitufos, the Smurfs. And I will go and do it. And then, you know, I remember like making a cajete, which is like, you know, I don't know what happened. I remember making a cajete, which is like, you know, you make a little surquito around the tree and then you put the manguera, right? And I remember like making like canalitos from one like tree to the next. And then I will irrigate that, right? And I will make like little canals and kind of like the Incas. Anyways, I remember doing all that. And when we moved here, I was like, we live in the projects. And there was no access to like matas and árboles and nothing like that. And at the beginning, I was kind of happy because now I can watch cartoons, right? But then like you miss that, you know, la añoranza de hacer todas esas cosas. And now as a grown person, you know, I'm coming back to it. And I think that if we can get kids to like love that before they get to an older age where they want to go back, it's even better, right? Because you don't break the cycle. And yeah, you know, like la gente sabía cuándo sembrar, cuándo regar, cuándo levantar la cosecha. Astronomía, ¿no? En nuestras raíces, los aztecas, los mayas. Ellos sabían todo eso. And we're losing a lot of that, so I'm glad that we're reconnecting that. So as a teacher, I want to make that knowledge accessible to my students because it's beautiful. And when we go into these hikes, we always acknowledge the indigenous peoples, the flora, the fauna, and the ecosystems. We have like little educational nuggets, something that I learned from Knowles. So every student is responsible for creating like a 5-minute like educational segment. So we go and we talk about the Maidu, the Nisenan people. And it's beautiful because they get to reconnect. And at the same time, we get to honor the original owners of the land, the caretakers of the land. And I think that that's something that has been missing, right? Somos parientes, yes, pero let's acknowledge the indigenous people from that area. So it's all about claiming the land and claiming the roots.
Gracias, Chico. Ceci.
Bueno, pues aquí realmente conectarte con la naturaleza está un poco más cerca y a la vez lejos, ¿no? Me acuerdo que, por ejemplo, cuando llegamos a vivir a Cancún, it's a very young city. It's only have like 50 years from born. So when we arrived here, like 45 years ago, it's no a lot of houses and everything. And my dad loved to go out there and love to walk in the jungle. And I'm very little, and he loves to put me in his shoulders and go in the jungle. And my mom is like, oh my God, a snake is gonna bite the little girl, or you know. And I love snakes and I love birds and I love everything. But when I grow up, it's like Chico. I like to see TV and to be more inside than outside. But when my husband and I discovered this marvelous world about birds, we think it's very important to share. And for us, the most important thing is to educate the others, because we feel like we don't have the opportunity to know about the simple things about what's your 20 common birds in your city. The people don't know. If you go to another place, si tú vas a un pueblo, la gente te puede decir 80 nombres de aves, pero si tú vas a una universidad, no te pueden decir ni 5 nombres de aves, porque no las conocen, porque no están en contacto con ellas. Entonces ha sido interesante para nosotros el ver que lo primero es llegar a las personas a través de la educación y de que ellos puedan conectarse, que puedan conocer y conectarse con lo que está afuera, pero viviéndolo. Como decían ustedes, ¿no? Si tú no sientes el olor de la flor, si tú no ves el color o escuchas el canto de las aves, y mientras más personas puedes llegar, when you can connect more people from different levels, from different backgrounds, for different races and different abilities or disabilities, it's so interesting how you can create these webs and the knowledge can grow everywhere. Es tan interesante ver cómo cuando llevas a un recorrido a una persona ciega o a una persona sorda y empiezas a aprender y a descubrir otras cosas que a lo mejor no te habías dado oportunidad. Es como tener, it's like have different perspectives of the environment and of the outdoors from different people, and I love that.
Gracias, Ceci. And I know we got some questions coming in, so we'll transition into those. But I'll ask one more quickly. You all covered on so many things. Obviously, that feeling, ni de aquí ni de allá. There's that expression, a veces, like, ni de aquí ni de allá, neither from here nor there. You watch the movie Selena, you know the dad was stressing that in terms of you can't be Mexican enough when you go back, and you can't be American enough here, and you have to work twice as hard to be able to prove that you can be both. And I can see how that's reflected in whether you're biology or conservationist or birder, right? Like you have that sense of overcoming imposter syndrome. Similar for me was moving from a place of shame to pride. Coming to the United States, llegando a California, I was surrounded by a lot of having to face being almost con pena, right? Shame being Mexican, because so much around you was not supporting it. But then we get to that classic, you take your first Chicano study course in college, right? Y todos salimos salimos danzantes aztecas. But I think it's so that I say that because of that reconnection that many of you are mentioning, right? So that happens in many ways in our cultural identity, in our roots, in the way that we kind of step into our affirmation and our power of who we are. And so I say that because Chico and as some of you mentioned, that also comes with a reconnection to the land, to nature, right? To our other than human kind of community members. And that it's a reminder that it's there, that's related but different than how we might traditionally approach a bird or a tree or a plant, right? Like this is a tree and you identify it with this way. You count it, you measure it, you tag it, you classify it, it's done. But then you listen to some of your tíos and abuelos and whatnot, the framing is, this is what we call it, and this is what it's for, right? And this is very different than this is what it is, and this is how you classify it, rather than this is what how we use it in the community. And that's why you can have everything be good para el riñón. It doesn't matter if it's actually good for the riñón, it's not. It's the fact that there's that community valuation, right? Although sometimes there is, and then we end up taking it. So I want to put that in there because really quick round before we jump into the group questions is, what is one thing that you want to stress again for our respective communities that you really want to see that reconnection happen? In other words, por ejemplo, por decir, I do this work because I really want to make sure that my parents are laborers, that we're reminded that what they know is valued, and they didn't need to have a Eurocentric degree to prove it. As an example. So we'll quickly go around. Tanya, if you want to kick us off, and then Chico, Ceci, Jessica, and Emma.
Can I get booted to the end?
You definitely can. So Chico, Ceci, Jessica, Neymar, and Tania. And you can always pass.
Repite la pregunta, por favor.
¿Qué es algo que quieres estresar y reenforzar que recordemos de cómo estamos conectados a la tierra? Or where do you want to make sure we don't forget that, just like we reconnect to our culture, where do you want our community to remember our connection?
So I wrote a little saying, rancho walks, we're actually hiking, right? So we come from that, right? We were in Mexico. If I just saw a friend of mine, she's visiting Guanajuato, and she's in her grandmother's rancho, and like, you know, it's like she's in the outdoors. She's like out there, you know, going to like pozos and like different things. So that is part of us, you know. When I was growing up, remember I said that I always thought, oh, esos paragüeros, right? But in reality, it's in us, right? Because we come from those type of backgrounds, especially if you're from a rural area in Mexico, right? I remember going to Nayarit when I was little, and we will go to my grandfather's huerta de mangos. Nos subimos a los árboles, cortamos los mangos. You listen to all kinds of, you know, ranas and sapos and all kinds of stuff. So all that is in us, right? We just have to tap into it. And if we fall in love with it, share it with others, right? Like me as an instructor, as a teacher, as an educator, I want my students to fall in love with that too. And I think that's one of the things that we can do. Like, do not be selfish, you know, show others where to go to have a similar experience. I don't update this a lot. You guys remember Tumblr? You know, it was big back maybe like, I don't know, 6 years ago. So there's a Tumblr page called Chicano in the Wilderness. And in that page, I put photographs of the hikes that I take in our vicinity, right? I put like how to get there, the instructions and all this and that. And I ranked them on how easy or hard or, you know, it was. So people like oftentimes they go there and then they do it, right? But I want to stress too, like, you know, like the leave no trace behind, you know, motto. So make sure that, you know, you don't leave anything there and make it seem like nobody ever walked there. So I guess it's sharing that knowledge y convivir with others, you know.
Gracias, Chico. Ceci?
For me, I think la capacidad de observar. Todas las cosas han estado ahí siempre y las hemos visto, pero no nos detenemos a observarlas. Y esa capacidad de asombrarnos y revalorar nuestros tesoros naturales. El poder transmitirle a las personas, if you observe, if you give the time to really connect, you can be always amazed about your natural treasures. That's for me.
Gracias, Ceci. Jessica?
Yeah, I think one of the things as a biologist is sometimes I see people, you know, there's places where there's people in the trails, sometimes there's not. And a lot of times I just see people just whizzing by and not really observing nature and seeing it, especially working with plovers and salt ponds. It's not much to look at. It's more like a moonscape, and people are like, oh, there's nothing there. And I, you know, try to explain to people, like, hey, there's something there. There's a bird breeding there. You know, you can't really see it. You need special stuff to see it, or I point it out, you know, and then a lot of time, you know, it's just reminding people that, you know, even if it's not like something gorgeous or pretty, like it has inherent value, and just, you know, being able to coexist and share. And I know a lot of these places, you know, here in the Bay Area, for example, you can literally go 10 miles and you have a state park, a county park, parks. We're very spoiled in that aspect. And it's one of those things that a lot of communities aren't, you know, don't know about it. And especially, you know, as myself, you know, growing up, you know, I was spoiled going fishing, camping, stuff like that. And that's not everyone's story. Not a lot of people grow up doing that, you know, and it's just, you know, reminding yourselves that you're sharing this space with nature and wildlife, and, you know, it's a privilege and we have to protect it. And at the same time, you know, as a biologist, it's my job to, even though I'm focusing on animals, is to, you know, focus on people understanding, you know, this is what this is why it's there, this is why I need to protect it. At the same time, this is why you need to enjoy it, because it can be taken away, you know. And it's just one of those things that, yeah, it's definitely, you know, it's a community thing, and it's just, yeah, it's pretty special. And it's, you know, I think as parents, sometimes, you know, we're busy with technology, this and that, and it's sometimes we need to just kind of come back to nature, remind ourselves, like, hey, Mother Nature's there for a reason.
Great. Gracias, Jessica. Hema?
I think the one word I want to stress to everyone is comunidad, community, just because I think the outdoors has a lot of potential for, you know, both having a lot of work from us to put into it, but also healing us, as well, as we've kind of been alluding to in the sort of reconnecting back with the land. And for so many people, that's inaccessible because their community isn't there. And I think for those people that are listening, I think you're already the people that are with your ears open, and you're ready to sort of make that jump, and you're ready to sort of bring people in. And I, I know that it's very hard, but I think we need each and every one of you to be the ones to be like, hey, you know, we can be the ones to bring our community to this place, because without that, those connections are just not going to happen. They don't happen out of nowhere. And, you know, as things get worse with climate change and with pollution and all of these other things, more people will be kind of drawn to it out of being forced and pushed to the edge. But just as many people will live their whole lives suffering from the effects of this kind of pollution without even knowing, you know, this is exactly why it's happening. They just take it, you know, they keep taking all of the suffering and all of the abuse. And I think especially now with, it feels like everything is going wrong this year, with all of the with the virus and with, you know, general sort of like civil unrest that's going on and hard feelings. I think one of the things that has been kind of heartening to me is that, you know, even though that it's been a mixed thing with people trying almost too hard to get outdoors, like a lot of people are looking for that sort of escape and that sort of healing. And I think if we can bring our communities along with us and make this a space that everyone feels safe, and makes it a fight that everyone feels that they are a part of, because, you know, whether you like it or not, everyone is a part of this fight. And we're going to be, either we're going to fight it now with policy and with you know, actions that we all take to restore our environment, or we're going to fight it in 50 years when we're fighting wars for water. We don't really have a choice in this. So I just want to stress that this is something that we all need to come together for.
Gracias. Thank you, Emma. Tanya?
Yeah, I think I'll make this quick so we could jump onto some panel questions. But I think just acknowledging that, you know, these sciences, right, this conservation field has to be meshed with also the social sciences. Like they're often talked as two separate issues. They're often seen like, oh yeah, like race has nothing to do with this, you know, identities have nothing to do with this. No, they're all mixed together. And I think that has to be recognized, and that has to be deconstructed, specifically in American context. Like, you know, because there's too much after effects. And the fact is that, you know, science is disproportionately affecting a lot of communities of color. You know, climate change is disproportionately affecting communities of color. Same way with environmental racism, it exists. You know, trash dumps, like we can go on and name all these things. Like we can't treat them as isolated issues, because they're not. I think once conservation starts acknowledging that and starts dismantling that, then it will be able to reach a more cohesive effort and tackle against all these issues. I think with that said as well, for a lot of like, you know, Black, Indigenous people of color communities in general, like in this field, and a lot of us in the American system, like we are literally magic. I was like, because there's so much things that are often against us, and we're still thriving, we're still surviving, and we are our living ancestors.
Gracias, Tanya. All right, so there's a few questions, and then I'm going to just throw them a few at some of you. So it's rather than the whole group, just to see how many we got through them. Pero igualmente, if you're like, no, I have a really strong point to make on that one, you're not going to be cut off. Two of the questions are around getting outdoors in the time of this pandemic, right? COVID-19. And then there's another question really around quote unquote community engagement, which is like the proverbial, how do we get more Latinx communities, more Raza really to be part of organizations like Audubon or to do some of this work. So I'll wrap those up together to be able to say, Audubon team, this is what you do essentially. So we'll start with you, Tanya and Amar. Do you have like one specific concrete type of action step or question or consideration for people that ask that question? How do we connect more with the XYZ community?
You want to go first, Haymar, or do you want me to go first?
You go.
Hire people that look like them. Y'all want to do this work, but you don't even have your staff that look like them. You know, if you just hire stuff that looks like them, you will be jumping, you know, quite a big step, because then half of the time you don't even have to prove who you are. You know, so hire people that look like them. And I mean, that's just the first step. After that, like they will bring up a new perspective. But I think just hire people that look like them.
Gracias, Tanya. Anything you would add, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this kind of goes into some of the things that I faced in the career, where when I was first getting into conservation, and I kind of got in more upstate northern California, so it was a much wider area, and I kind of felt that myself as a conservationist, it's kind of like a conflicting thing, because I already look different than most of the people out there, and a lot of conservation work is, you know, bridging people together and making sort of alliances so that you can do restoration work or put in environmentally friendly policies with, you know, farmers or ranchers or all of these different people that have stakes in the land. I felt, wow, I already have this biracial thing going on. And then in addition to that, I haven't really talked about it, but I'm queer, I'm trans. So I have like all of these things going against me, and I'm thinking, wow, why do I think about it that way? And I guess I realized when I kind of came further south and started working with the larger sort of Audubon California and with groups like Latino Outdoors, that it's like, oh wait, I'm not just like some kind of alien in the field. So very much going into Tanya's point, our identities and our diversity is a strength and not a weakness. And I think conservation in general needs to be better about that message. Like, we can just use it as a cheap talking point, or we can do what Tanya said and hire people to actually connect with these communities.
Gracias. Thank you, Haymar. Well, we're almost at time, but we'll get one more quick round. This idea of getting outdoors, so to the Gonzalez's, Jessica and then Chico, what is one way that you're getting outdoors right now or connecting to nature?
Well, one of the ways I connect is like, you know, I basically work outdoors. I don't work in an office setting typically. I'm basically out 5 days a week. Like today I was in monitoring. I was doing a snowy plover survey, and sometimes people are curious of what I'm doing, so I kind of explain what's going on. And, you know, even that, I like to enjoy the outdoors in the Bay Area, and it's great. So I'm basically living outdoors.
Chico?
Well, unfortunately for me, I haven't been outdoors during this whole COVID-19 thing, but I do have plans to get out there. I actually just got my kayak. I just washed it and getting it ready. But I have a little girl, right? So I'm like really afraid to bring things into my house. And my mother-in-law, I have, you know, we're quarantining with her. So she's like 65. She has high blood pressure and all this and that. So a lot of that is keeping me from being out right now. But I do have a point to make on the previous question, and that is make it accessible, Razafy your outings. And by that is like, you know, make it community oriented, right? Bring some burritos, some guitarras, invite la familia, las abuelitas, los niños, everybody. And I think that you will get a lot of people to be out there. And I actually like something that you have done, Jose. You have used this strategy, right? The same way that we set up Noches Culturales, I think that's the same way we need to do these outings for the whole family. You know, you bring some pan dulces, some burritos, some like frutas and stuff like that people will come. So you don't have to be like, you know, like this is organization, this is the people, I'm bringing this to you. No, it's like you're like with them organizing. ¿Qué les gustaría ver? ¿Quién va a traer las tortillas? ¿Quién va a traer esto, otro? You know? And I think that our people are like that. We're like very community oriented. And if you include them in the planning, they will show up and you will have a great time.
Perfect. All right. So I know we're going to be closing up right now. So the way we're going to close this is by two things. One is all panelists in the chat, drop in how you would like to be supported, either your Instagram handle, Twitter, organization you want them to support. That way people can see that. And then we're going to close by everybody quickly going in a circle, because then we're going to get kicked off on the Audubon platforms here and Latino Outdoors platforms. What is one of your favorite birds? So just one word, and then that'll be our closing, okay? Doesn't have to be your most favorite. It can just be a favorite bird in whatever language you'd like to do that, okay? As people are dropping the support on there, Ceci, you'll start us off. We'll go Ceci, Jessica, Haymar, Tania, and Chico.
La green jay o la chara verde.
Western snowy plover.
Osprey.
El buitre or turkey vulture.
El águila.
Y con eso, aquí se quebró una taza. Cada quien ya está en casa, so make sure to stay there and wear your mask. So with that, thank you. We want to honor the time that people have. We'll follow up as appropriate. And gracias for being here.
Gracias.
Adios.
Thanks.